Welcome to the first section of the module 1 of the course Azure Data Factory Fitment and Data Pipeline. My name is Shantanu Das and I'm going to be the instructor of this course. Before getting on the hands-on session, we are going to get started with the fundamentals and lay out the foundation of what Azure Data Factory is, what are the components. We're going to take some analogy of orchestration because Azure Data Factory is a hardcore orchestration tool which we are going to use. So without further ado, let's get started. This is going to be the introduction to Azure Data Factory, wherein we are going to get started with understanding what Azure Data Factory is. So it's an orchestration tool. Those who has a little bit of idea, but what is orchestration is all about. Let's take an analogy of building a house. When you want to build a house, first thing you do is you start off with the architecture of that house. You hire an architect who's going to design the architecture of your house, where you're going to put out your sofas, where you're going to put out your couch, what color it's going to be, how many floors it's going to be, where what's going to be the size of your wardrobe, and all those details are laid out by the architecture. Now the second primary task which comes up with is the specialized laborers, or the people who takes care of these jobs of carpenter, of plumbers, who's gonna build your house, who's gonna make sure all the fitments in your pipeline. All these tasks are done by another set of group of people. So there are multiple tasks which is happening. One is architecture, defining the architecture. There's electrician, plumber. All of these are defined as individual tasks, and they are governed by obviously they need the raw material also, but all of these happens on some sort of platform or land, in analogy of building a house. And combining all of these tasks together makes the orchestration of tasks, which means there are multiple tasks or activities just happening, but you need some people or some type of application or set of users who could govern these tasks. And that's where the orchestration comes into the picture, that we have multiple number of tasks and activities, and on top of those activities or tasks, there should be somebody or some app who needs to govern those tasks, who needs to make sure that the tasks are delivered on time, and whatever the expected inputs were given, the tasks are built in that way. So that's orchestration of the task, and that's the base of the Azure Data Factory. It's an orchestration tool which helps you to build your data pipeline. Now let's talk about try to understand what data factory kind of visually looks like. Let's suppose you're performing some sort of data operation on your data coming from different sources. Now first task you perform is, we took the analogy of house, building home. We gonna take the same analogy because in the screenshot you see that the visual representation of one of the example of a task happening inside Azure Data Factory. What happening is, you have your one of the first task is check the folder if exists or not, and this is one of the tasks. Now the second one is, you want to make sure that the folder which consists of which holds all of your data, those data needs to be copied to somewhere. Now this could be your SQL server, or could be Amazon S3 buckets or somewhere. Now, once that is done, you want to make sure that you want to log whether it was a successful action or a failure action. In case of failure, you want to trigger some sort of other activity. If it's successful, you want to make sure that it runs on a loop variable for all the folders. So these are tasks, and this is orchestrated by Azure Data Factory without writing any custom code. We're going to get into details later, but that's the first gist or first highlight of 30,000 feet view which you get for Azure Data Factory. Is Azure Data Factory is the only tool? Absolutely no. There are a bunch of other tools also available in the market. One of the famous tool is Apache Airflow, which is an open source workflow management platform similar to Azure Data Factory. It was started by Airbnb. That's why you see the Air name suffix first, which was launched by Airflow, and it was in fact, it is used by a lot of companies to programmatically author and schedule the workflow and monitor them via built-in Airflow interface. Now, the downside of using Airflow is you got to write custom code for using all of these task. You see there are 4 tasks coming right over here, and these are in the form of DAG. These are acrylic graph which you could see and visualize what's happening inside each of these tasks. The downside which I see for these DAGs are that you would need to write custom code for each of these tasks. However, in compared to Azure Data Factory, you don't need to write any custom code. All of these tasks are by default available on Azure Data Factory under the pipeline section, and you could just drag and drop and use the canvas, open canvas, to build your Azure Data Factory data pipeline. So that's the comparison when you want to compare two tools with each other, Azure Data Factory and Airflow. Both of them does the same, pretty much same kind of job. One of them is open source, another, the Azure Data Factory, is a proprietorship tool from Azure Microsoft. Moving on to the next section, let's talk about if you're coming from the on-premises background, if you're working on SQL Server integration service, there are a bit of analogy, similarity between both of these tools, SSIS, and on the left-hand side, you've got Azure Data Factory. So on the SSIS, the packages, the task, the ones which is going to perform all of the tasks is going to be called as packages. However, in Azure Data Factory, it is called as pipeline. You've got activities in Azure Data Factory, which consist of copying of your files, which we saw in the previous screenshot, and they are called as task in SSIS. You've got linked service, which is used to link your Azure Data Factory with the source or destination so that they can talk to each other and perform the task, which is called as connection manager in SSIS. Datasets in Azure Data Factory, however, source and destination in SSIS, and we've got source and sync and source and destination in SSIS. These are a few of the jargons or naming convention which we are going to use pretty frequently in our upcoming section, and we're going to make sure that you're kind of familiar with all of them so that they don't kind of come as a surprise. So Azure Data Factory is not only helpful in transforming the data, it is also a conventional tool for not only your ETL and ELT processes as well. So ETL, extract, transform, and load, we all are aware of it. Extract is you're extracting your data from different sources. Could be your IoT devices, could be your automobile devices, could be logs or verbose logs coming from different servers, and you want to make sure that you load the data. Before it, you transform it with some sort of tool. Could be Azure, Databricks, could be Spark, could be Hadoop, MapReduce. And once you've transformed the data, you want to load the data to visualize it. So that's convention ETL process, and Azure Data Factory helps you to achieve those ETL processes. Also, now a newer way of transforming your data is ELT, which is extract, load, and transform, because we saw some of the flaws with ETL, because when you transform the data, it could take days, months, or weeks, and there could be some delays when it comes to transforming it. Now with ELT, what happens is you extract the logs or data coming from different devices, you load the data to the destination. Now this destination could be your Azure Synapse, Power BI's, Tableau, and then you transform the data real time so that you have minimal lag, and your deployment or delivery of data cycles is pretty fast. That's why you use ELT, which is ELT instead of ETL, which is extract, load, and transform. So what happens in the ETL is you first extract the data from different sources, you transform it and load it into visualization tool. With ELT, you do a little different. You first extract it, obviously the step remains same, and then you load the data onto the destination, and over there you transform your data to achieve the speed and regularity of your data. So Azure Data Factory is an Azure's cloud ETL services tool which helps you to achieve your data integration and data governance. It gives you a data integration and transformation layer that works for your digital transformation initiatives. It offers a code-free UI, and that's the best part for intuitive authoring and a single pane of glass for monitoring and management. You could, if you're coming from SSIS background, you could just lift and shift your existing SQL Server integration packages on Azure as well, and you don't bother about all the on-premises hustles of upgrades, patching, scaling. All of these are taken care by Azure Data Factory. It's a serverless data integration tool, fully integrated with your ELT and ETL processes, a code-free UI to manage your data governance pipeline to data for your data pipeline, wherein you've got your multiple task runnings for data transformation, and you want to orchestrate them with a single tool, and that is Azure Data Factory. So that's Azure Data Factory in a nutshell. So let's take a look at a few of the top features of Azure Data Factory. So if your data is increasing, because you know that storing data, extracting data has become really easy, become really cheap, and you know that all of the data which exists, only 5 to 7% of the all entire data is actually processed. So you need some sort of platform which is scalable enough to handle this increase in data. And remember the three V's: velocity, variety, and volume. If your data kind of comes into these three V's, you want some sort of mature tool which can read the data from different sources, transform it easily, and then process it and visualize it for your business logic purpose. You need a single orchestration tool for all your data engineering needs, especially if you're coming from Azure background. Your data sets are stored in SQL Server or Event Hub, or maybe Azure Blob Storage. Azure Data Factory is a tool which you should consider using it. It integrates with Microsoft core services like Azure Vault for securing your passwords and secrets, Azure Storage, tables. Even if you want single sign-on authentication, you could use Azure Active Directory as well. Let's look at the few fun facts about Azure Data Factory. It's a cloud managed data tool, which means which happens with all of the cloud resources. You don't care about the patching, the scalability. When the load increases, you want to make sure that the scale also increases. All of these are handled by Azure Data Factory itself. We've got more than 80 connectors, which means you've got not only can connect Azure services like blob storage, cognitive search, Cosmos DB. You could over and beyond Azure, you could use connect to Amazon as well, Google BigQuery as well. You could use SAP HANA, SAP Table. So what I'm trying to say is, not only it supports Azure's connectors, Azure sources, you could connect to different sources beyond over Azure as well. Got easy transformation because the conventional methods like the inner join, dropping a table, rewriting column names, all of these features are available by default without you have to write a single piece of code, and gives you a better visual representation of what's happening inside your data transformation. Obviously, it's an orchestration tool which provides you code-free solution, which saves a lot of your time to write the canned code, or the code which already have been written. You just want to reuse it. You don't want to reinvent the wheel again and again. So that's where Azure Data Factory kind of comes into the picture. So these were a few of the cool features of Azure Data Factory, and this was just a foundation to get started with Azure Data Factory, wherein we discussed about what orchestration of task means, what is EDLT and ETL process. We discussed about ADF versus SQL Server integration service as well, and we then got started with Azure Data Factory. In the next video, we're going to get started with Azure Data Factory components. We're going to clear some of the myths. We're going to also understand when you should use Azure Data Factory and what's the difference between other plethora of tools also available in the market, and when you should actually choose Azure Data Factory. So I hope this was informative for the foundation of the course. We are going to get started with the components in the next video, and then there's a lot of fun hands-on session coming up. Stay tuned. I'll see you in a while. Thank you.